And welcome tonight to this installation or installment, not installation, this installment of Love and the Scriptures on tonight. So happy to have you with us, joining from wherever you are joining. Um, and I'm trying to make sure you know how the drill goes that we are broadcasting and coming across the way we need to on our platforms. Just taking a minute to get that part done. It's a good night tonight, and even though I'm not feeling good at all, was in Wichita this weekend and on uh, Monday and yesterday, and on the drive up, for whatever reason, um, having the air conditioning blowing right in my face and right on me um, has caused some starts to cause me to get congested, and well, it always starts with a sore throat first with me, and then from the sore throat, then it is scratchy throat, and then congestion, and gets in the head, and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's where I'm at now. Um, Maybe you can hear some of the congestion. But anyhow, we go on. We do what we must. School started today. I drove this morning, 5 a.m. Says the Porsche is in here. Hello, hello. So I am coming through on Facebook. Very good. I couldn't even see where Facebook was where it was and what to do with it on there. But it's coming through. All right. So very, very, very good. Um, so driving from 5 a.m. this morning, or at 5 a.m. is when I started on my way from Wichita here, and had to drive straight into work. We actually started school as teachers here in District 1, TPS, Tulsa Public Schools, started last Wednesday. Um, and today is our prep day because tomorrow students actually come into the building. We begin classes on tomorrow. And so, um, even with whatever's going on with me physically, I haven't got time for the pain. So we go on. My hair's all messed up. I got a bad hair day. If guys can have that, I got that going on. And this isn't no, I'm not soliciting any kind of pity or any of that. I'm just telling you what's going on with me and what's up. I got a cough drop in my mouth now because I've had coughing spell. So y'all pray for me. Sister Portia say cognac, honey, and lemon, otherwise known as a hot tammy. I don't call them hot toddy. I say hot tammy. But yeah, we see that. Um, I wish I could take the time to actually to doctor myself. Anyhow, so we're here tonight. I invite you to be thought partners, conversation partners with us in our discussion on tonight. Let me say this first. Since this is the return to school season, um, then on next week, I'm going to do what I did last year around this time, which is a love checkup for educators. And this is a way that we can look at ourselves as we are in the classroom or in the school building. And as we um, experience what is going on in the school, there's a way for us to check ourselves, to look at ourselves. Of course, our job is observation, engagement, and interaction with students and with people in the building. But in order to have the best experience with that, you have to check yourself. And so I'm going to be talking about a love checkup for educators like I did on last year. That's coming up next week. Ginger lemon honey with cinnamon. All right, now y'all, come on, give me these recipes up in here to get me better. Um, Pastor Gwen Collins, Derek, my colleague, my dear friend, is in here giving suggestions on how to get me better, what to take. Since Vicki Johnson Williams is also here. Good to have everybody who's with us on tonight. Last These last 2 days while I was in Wichita, I was invited by the Southwestern District moderator. He was very specific when he asked me to come. First, he asked about my availability, if I had the time to be able to come. And when I told him that I did, he told me I asked him what was he interested in, what did he want want me to talk about. And he said, because he knows my lane when it comes to African American history, knows what my passion is, my personal life and study, which is professional now because of me teaching African American studies, AP African American studies in school. But he says two things. Y'all, excuse me. He says he wanted me to talk about Christian education, and he wanted me to talk about the Black presence in the Bible. Very interestingly, and I actually didn't say this then. I'm thinking about it, and I thought about it as I was driving up, that back in the middle, late 80s, and for sure throughout the 90s, there was a big interest in biblical studies and in historical studies, cultural studies, about that very subject, Black presence in the Bible. And so the idea that there were actually Black people in the Bible, that was a big uh, issue of interest during that time. And the approach was from the perspective of being able to locate Black people in the Bible. Dr. Charles Colfer was a leader in that actual field. And one of the first texts that I came across, books that I came across that addressed the subject, was his book and Walter McCrae's book with the title Black Presence in the Bible, or Identifying Black Presence in the Bible. And then Walter McCrae writes a second volume, a volume 2 of his Black presence in the Bible, and talks about the table of nations, Genesis chapter 10. Let me suggest that to you, sisters and brothers, Genesis chapter 10, in terms of understanding how the world is populated after the flood, how the world is repopulated through Noah's sons, and how the designation of what peoples of the world come from those three sons. And so the idea, again, from that perspective during that time, was about identifying and locating Black people in the Bible. But we took a very different perspective these last 2 days as we dealt with the subject. And the perspective was just to take a simple view of what the world was as humanity begins on the planet. And so if and when you take that dive, or you ask that question, or what was that like? How was the earth peopled? What did those people look like? Then the question of Black presence in the Bible takes a different spin altogether. One of the things that I showed the group on yesterday, concluding the presentation, well, the second part of the presentation, was how National Geographic Society started a genographic project. And in this project, their intention was to determine. They found out that the Y chromosome, which is a male chromosome, had actually mutated, and that every male in the world has this chromosome, and it comes from what would be the progenitor or the first man. They undertook to determine what that man would have looked like, the first man. And you can say Adam if that's what you want to call him. This team of National Geographic scholars, I might suggest to you or tell you, it's not even a suggestion, they're all white. There were no African Americans that were visible on this team. And this is a YouTube video. You can actually pull this up on YouTube. And so they went through this process in terms of the period of where humanity would have began, which will trouble a whole lot of Christians because it does not come to the clean, simple, short date of 6,000 years ago. This date they put forth is a date of 60,000 years ago. And I'm going to speak to that in just a minute for those who, the Christians who will be troubled by that. Who is that came in here? Tracy Yeats and Ma is here. Hey, y'all, how y'all doing tonight? So good to have you to come be with us on Love and the Scriptures. We're talking about the idea of Black presence in the Bible and why that study alone does not encompass what is actually the reality of the Bible. And so in this National Geographic Genographic project, they are trying to determine what the first man would have looked like. And they use different skull shapes, the development of the skull, shapes of the skull, different features of that. They talk about the period at which this would have occurred and several other factors that they, several other factors that they work with to make their assumption of what the first man would have looked like. Let me say to you again, sisters and brothers, there were no African Americans, there were no Africans, there were no black people involved on the team that did this research. But let me show you the picture that they came with. Stanley spelled backwards. Loving this content. Bless you so much. So glad you're on here. Let me show you the picture that the Genographic Project, sponsored by National Geographic and IBM, International Business Machines, the computer company. This is what they said the first man would have looked like. Leave your comments in the field. Say something to me. Talk to me. Tell me what you think about what National Geographic would have said the first man would have looked like. Look at, obviously, those lips. All right. And they ain't just regular lips or medium-sized lips. Look at the nose. It's not just a regular size or medium nose. Look at how his eyes are cut out. And of course, do not miss the pigmentation of his skin. Don't miss that. Hold up to your left. Okay, I'm sorry. Is that a better view? Can we see that? This is the image that sculptors and forensic scientists came up with as the image of what the first man, the first human, would have looked like. And so I give the date again. Yes, Sister Portia. Sister Portia says, brother, yes. The dating, again, is not 6,000 years. What we are generally, especially within Christianity, are understanding the time frame for the creation of man to be. This is suggested to have been 60,000 years ago. But here it is for Christians who may quibble on that. Of course, Peter is the one who will say to us, speaking from God's perspective, that a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day when it is past. This is from God's perspective. But before Peter gets that idea and revelation, the psalmist in the 90th Psalm will give the very same conclusion in terms of time in the presence of God, that a day is as 1,000 years. And so for those who quibble or who are locked into a 6,000 year understanding of the history of man, let me suggest to you why that date is suggested to us. It gets heavy. Let me show you the book that this image comes out of. Oh, and so the perspective, instead of the idea of trying to identify and locate if there are Black people in the Bible, Brother Theron Williams has written this book. And let me recommend my sisters, let me recommend my brothers, let me recommend this book to you. I highly, highly recommend it. Now, the one I have is the first edition of this book, which cost me $59. I checked Amazon yesterday. It's $62 on there today, the first edition. There is a second edition of this book as out that is, excuse me, it's $15.99 on most sites. I think on Amazon it's $15.30 or $15 and just some change. But I highly, highly recommend this book to you. And listen to what Dr. Williams has titled his book, The Bible is Black History. And so what Williams dispenses with is the notion that you might be able to find Black people in the Bible. He dispenses with that notion. His perspective is that the Bible itself is Black history. And so let me say a couple of quotes that some others have made about the Bible. Bishop Wilbert McKinley, the late bishop of the Great Elam Church up in Brooklyn, New York, says this about the Bible. The Bible is a Black book. That's what Bishop Wilbert McKinley says back in the 1990s. Kane Hope Felder, former New Testament professor and head of the divinity religious department at Howard Divinity School, left us in 2018. Kane Hope Felder says upwards of 75% of the Bible is talking about Black people and Black lands. Oh, yeah. Let me tell you what Dr. James, Professor James Small says. He says, if you're talking about world history, he says the African was responsible, or 90% of world history is about African people. He says that the African was heavily involved in the other 10%. I'm trying to give us an idea and a picture about how to see this idea, where we first thought that we need to need to look and to see if there were Black people in the Bible. Here's a whole nother perspective to approach it from. Who is it next? Dr. Booker T. Coleman. I'm sorry, Dr. Phil Valentine will say this. Phil Valentine says, that's the problem that the anthropologists and the archaeologists have, that the deeper they dig, the blacker the earth gets. In other words, that what they are finding as they are digging deeper in the earth is that Black people were always and already there. So when we come then, sisters and brothers, to this dating of 6,000 years, which would is suggested as the life of human beings, you've heard the terminology prehistoric, right? You know what that means. Or at least you have heard the term. What does it actually mean to consider something prehistoric? This designation of prehistoric came up when the European discovered that last quote that I just talked about, what Phil Valentine says that the deeper archaeologists and anthropologists dig, the blacker the earth gets. When the European understood that the Black man, the African, had been on the planet for thousands of years before there was a European, they considered that part of history that they could not record because they were not there. That's what they called prehistoric. Okay. And all of that history before that time. And I know this is really controversial stuff, and I'm not afraid of any controversy. So any opinion that anybody has, any opposing view, any kind of light even you want to shed on anything or add anything to the discussion, please, I welcome thought partners. I welcome conversation partners to be in this, to discuss this, to have this conversation with us. And so what you're dealing with then is that there is a time frame on this earth where there were only Black people. And I'm pausing for emphasis there. Tell me what you think about that. Tell me what you hear when you hear that. How does that sound? How does that fall on your ears when you hear me say that? That there was a time on this planet, and it was in the thousands of years, that the only humans living were Black people. And now, this is not any esoteric kind of knowledge that I'm coming across with, because National Geographic has videos, again, on YouTube. They have documentaries, hour and a half, 2 hours long, that actually talk about the beginning of humanity, how it begins, and not just on the African continent, but deep inside the continent, below Sudan, which the Bible calls Cush, below Ethiopia, down towards Zimbabwe, which is the southern region of Africa. National Geographic and other historical channels and documentary makers talk about the beginning of humanity coming from that part of the world and then migrating, Black Africans, and migrating from there all across the planet. They even talk about from that idea what causes the change in pigmentation, all of those kinds of different things and that. And so the idea when it comes to Black people in the Bible is not to just be able to identify and to determine or find who is Black in there, but to understand that the Bible itself is Black history. Interesting thing that you can do this on your own. I've said to you that I want you to read the Table of Nations, which is Genesis chapter 10. It's the whole chapter, 1 through 32. But you can also, in the Bible, the word Cush, the word Ethiopia, excuse me, the word Egypt, all, of course, are African places. When you count, and you can do this with a concordance, when you count how many times those countries, those African countries, are mentioned in the Bible, you know what you'll discover? That the Bible mentions Africa more than any other place in the world. in the world. And somebody might ask, hearing me talk about this, the Bible is Black history. I'm recommending this book to y'all. The Bible is Black history. Dr. Theron Williams. You can get it. You can get it. You can get it. Amazon has it for $15 and some change. It's $15.99 on other sites. You can actually go to. There's a website. The Bible is Black history. I don't remember .com or .org, but the Dr. Theron Williams is on YouTube. You can look him up on YouTube as well. But ma'am, sir, I urge you to get this book. Somebody might ask, in hearing this discussion that we're having, well, if the Bible is Black history and what I said about Africa and Africans is true about there being Black people on the planet thousands of years before there anybody else on the planet, how did we get to where things are that when it comes to the Bible, in the Bible, God is white, Jesus is white, the Holy Ghost is white, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of the prophets, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and all of the New Testament, how everybody in the Bible is white? Very good question. I'm glad you asked. Dr. John Henry Clark, you can find him on YouTube as well. John Henry Clark says that the most insidious crime that was committed by the European was the colonization of image, particularly the image of God. You know what colonization means. Colonization is when a nation goes into another nation and they control the people by forcing them to produce whatever kind of goods or resources or services that financially edify and benefit the colonizing nation. Okay, you go in and take control of the people, take control of the kind of all of those kinds of things, and you benefit from what actually happens there. Clark says the most insidious crime of the European is that they colonized image. What does that mean? That they said this particular image is the standard of what beauty and of what is aspired to be worth something. This image. And it was their features. But Clark says, most insidiously, they colonized the image of God. They took the features that represented their physical appearance and image and ascribed it, saying that this is what God looks like. And we don't have time to go very deep into the rest of how these things work, but we're going to continue it in our group, the Love in the Scriptures group. We're going to continue this discussion, and we'll talk more about the way the colonized image of God is what turned the world upside down to where everybody believes that God is white and that Jesus is white. But I'm going to say this, we just got about a minute left. Interestingly, when God goes to create man, very different from creating everything else, he spoke and said, let there be, and all of these came. When it comes to creating man, God says, let us create man in our image and in our likeness. Of course, God is a spirit. We know that that's true. And spirits don't have physical or corporal bodies in that sense. Absolutely not. But what in the world does it mean if the first man that God creates is a Black African man, when God says that he's going to create man in his image and his likeness? Ponder that, and we'll pick it up so next time when we come to talk. Join us next week, Wednesday, 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more Love in the Scriptures. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Group, we're going to continue this discussion in the group. God bless you. Have a good night, everybody.